Hello everyone, this is Brian Kelly with Association Mavens, where you get direct access to some of the foremost thinkers and teachers in the association industry. My guest today is Lorraine Lavet. Lorraine is the National Association Practice Leader at Korn, Ferry and specializes in the recruitment of senior level executives for trade associations, professional societies, and other nonprofit organizations. She has spent more than 2 decades in association leadership positions, and I'm very excited to welcome Lorraine to Association Mavens.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for this opportunity.
You bet. So, Lorraine, I was introduced to you through a coworker of mine who had recommended that I talk with you to kind of get your unique perspective that you have in the association industry based on your role at Korn Ferry. So, I gave a quick rundown of what you do, but could you explain a little bit further for everyone in the audience, what exactly it is that you're doing in recruiting senior level executives for these nonprofits?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm delighted to note that this month is my 10th anniversary of leading the practice at Korn Ferry, following about, as you mentioned, about 20 years in the association space. I came here to lead a practice focused on C-suite, top-level executives in the association and professional society arena. And in about the last 10 years, I placed close to 120 CEOs of national and international organizations and some regional and local organizations. In the work that we do, we are very focused on identifying the best leader through not only their experience, but their fit with a particular organization's culture. So at Korn Ferry, not only do we work with boards and search committees across the globe to find the best possible talent based on their experience, but equally as important is how effectively they fit in the culture of that particular organization and working with the membership.
Excellent. And I like that because, what we're hearing a lot, even from past guests that I've had on Association Mavens episodes, culture is something, especially in the context of associations, that's becoming more and more important. And at Aptify, it's certainly something that we're very much in tune with, and over the last couple years have had a dramatic change in the culture here at our organization. So I'd love to have you talk a little bit more about that specific topic. What are some of the things that your clients are looking for related to culture, and how do you try to find the best fit for those senior executives that you're looking to place?
It's an extremely important question, because typically when Korn Ferry is brought in to help partner with the board or a search committee of an association or a professional society, something has happened. It's possibly a retirement, but it could also be a situation where the previous leader, for whatever reason, needs to move on. They may have made a lot of contribution for many years, but things have changed. Or perhaps the organization is just going through dramatic transformation and they simply need a new kind of a leader. So we observe all of those different trends from just steady growth to massive change and transformation, or even a turnaround where an organization could be going through some real fiscal challenges, and for whatever reason the incumbent was unable to take them and lead them to the next level. So the work in leadership is incredibly important, because everybody says they want a great leader, but if you were to ask 10 people walking down the street, define leader for me, you'd probably get 10 different answers depending upon their perspective. That's not going to work very well when you're leading a search with a diverse search committee, whether they be global, different levels in an organization, different geographic experiences, different generations. So Korn Ferry is uniquely suited to help a group align around a common definition for leadership using our proprietary leadership assessment tools. So in each one of our CEO searches that I lead, we invite into that process the search committee using some really exciting and dynamic tools that help them define the key competencies that they're looking for. And then we assess the candidates against those competencies by giving them some very easy to use online assessment tools. And then the candidate loves that, because we love to give our candidates feedback on their professional development, but more importantly, the client loves it because it gives a little science to the aura search.
Yep. Well, very good. So the next question that leads me to wonder about is, the last, let's say, few years within the association industry, there's been a tremendous impact related to societal changes with changing generation, so to speak. Technology has been rapidly changing, and a lot of these things have been coming together to create a situation where associations are just trying to figure out, where do we go from here? And I'm wondering, is, with boards essentially being like your clients, what are some of the things that they're looking for, or traits, etc., that they're saying, Lorraine and team at Korn Ferry, can you really help us find somebody that's going to take us into or through, the 21st century, so to speak? Just curious if you've got any insights into that.
No, it's a critical question, because the themes that you just identify, I tend to hear in nearly every search that we do. So you've really hit the most critical points. When you think of someone leading an association, it's rare that one person has everything. What you're most interested is in somebody as a leader who can assemble the very best team, who can help forge with the board a vision and an action plan against that vision. But most importantly, know how to assemble the talent pool and create a culture and foster a culture of innovation, of change, an organization that's nimble, an organization that anticipates changes that are affecting either their industry or the profession they're representing. And by creating that kind of a culture and organization that's nimble and dynamic, they're able to offer tremendous value to their constituency, because sometimes the member, if it's a company, they're focused, their heads down, they're focused on their company, meeting their goals and objectives and their financials. Perhaps there's some peripheral vision around their clients and their competitors, but it's hard for them to have that broader vision, particularly in a global industry. If it's a profession, most people are, again, doing their job, trying to do their very best, develop their professional competencies, stay ahead and from the standpoint of the knowledge they try to accrue, or some skills that they need to hone. But again, tough to be able to have a broader perspective. So if the association and society are truly embodying those qualities that we just discussed, is a good chance that the value you're going to offer to your members is far greater than you could possibly imagine, and the investment in terms of dollars and time that you as a member put into that organization comes back many times over in terms of return on investment. So those are the kinds of leadership traits: somebody who can create that culture, someone who can build the right team, and very importantly, someone who's adept at engaging the members. Member engagement, and your point is very critical with respect to demographics, has changed dramatically. Yep. You have in most associations and societies very different generations under the same tent, so to speak. And so there are still people who enjoy networking, meeting with each other in a more traditional fashion, and then you have generations that absolutely want to network, but they do so in a very different way. And to be relevant and prepared for the future, associations and societies must be ahead of the curve and really understand the best way to engage people, not force a one-size-fits-all, but customize to the different demographics, recognizing this is the future, and actually not to be afraid of it, to embrace it and look for ways to really, I'd say, up the return on investment to different demographics.
So is this something that you've seen in the last year, 2 years or so, or have you had this request from your clients going back a little bit further? And really the reason why I'm curious is just to see, is it something that is now just being looked at from boards of a lot of the organizations that you work with? Is it something that they've been thinking about for a while, or is it something that's become almost like an immediate need, like we need to start thinking about these things?
It's also a key question. I think one of the catalysts for this kind of discussion was the Great Recession. Coming out of the recession, organizations responded differently. Yeah. Some organizations, quite frankly, thrived. Some actually grew during that very challenging time. Others were able to maintain and stay the course, and others, unfortunately, suffered greatly. And depending upon how the leader took that organization through that very difficult time, boards have responded differently. And our organization, Korn Ferry, tends to come in when things aren't going as well as they could be. And what we learned from that was sometimes leaders didn't anticipate, didn't plan for how do you deal with a catastrophic situation like I think our entire country was going through. And with that said, the other phenomenon at the time was that when we were recruiting, coming out of that, even the successful CEOs, many of them didn't want to move. Some of them felt, I survived this well. My organization is thriving. I know what I have. I don't know what I'm going to inherit. I don't want to leave. So we had two things going on. We had some people who were being separated from their organization, but then we also had some very talented people who would not leave. And those were the most desirable people because they were the ones who were anticipating the trends that we just discussed. And that's why they survived or even thrived and grew. So I think that was one of the key catalysts, I would say, coming out of that for reinventing organizations, for transformation, for leading change, for really taking a step back and looking at the value proposition that organizations are offering, because dollars are dear and time even more so. Organizations thinned out their ranks. Member companies, in the case of trade associations, had far fewer people to attend events and conferences. Individual membership organizations were suffering because people weren't attending conferences like they used to. So all of these dynamics, I think, stemmed from organizations, memberships, trying to deal with these inevitable problems that hit post the recession. And I think it's never gone back. It's at this point, I'd say those trends are accelerating, not decelerating.
Well, I'm going to change direction a little bit, and this is something that through the course of our discussion here has kind of popped in my head as something I'd love to ask you about. The types of candidates that you're finding for your clients, do you tend to find individuals who work, they've got a long history within the association industry, for example, so they've worked at other organizations that are member-based? Or do you find that it's, you're pulling the talent from within the industry that particular association or nonprofit is representing? Maybe it's finance, for example. Or are you finding that people from outside that come from a completely different background, maybe haven't had much involvement with member-based organizations, but have a vision, have a talent that the board might be looking for? Out of those three types of categories, is it one that you're typically, zeroing in on? Is it a mixture of all of those? Would love to hear from you.
Yes, it's a great question. I would actually add a fourth to that, and that would be government officials. So if you look across the spectrum of searches that we do, there's no one way. Every search is quite customized, and it's not uncommon that in any given search, we're looking for 2, 3, or even 4 different profiles for that given search. That's not uncommon when you have a successor coming into a long-time leader. Sometimes when you had an organization where someone had been in the job 15, 20, 25 years even, organizations want to rethink and be very open-minded to the kind of leader in terms of profile they may pursue. So it's not uncommon for them to say to us, we want to see the very best person from the association, nonprofit community, someone who's been a government official in a relevant area, perhaps somebody who comes from business, and maybe someone who's just a best athlete. They're just a great leader. They are interested in moving into the nonprofit sector. They don't have any particular experience in our subject matter, but they sure know how to run an organization, lead conferences, engage customers. So they've had those kinds of experiences. We place people from literally every one of those walks of life. The key is having a board that's open-minded to that type of an approach. Yeah. Occasionally we'll do a search that's quite laser-focused where it's an advocacy organization. It's very clear that well more than half of the time of that CEO will be spent working with the administration at hand, or members of Congress, or governors or legislatures at the state level. So it's clear that they must have strong Washington or government affairs experience. If that is clearly the case, we're going to be far more focused and laser shot in terms of who we approach and who we go after. So it depends on the scenario that we're engaged in.
It's interesting. I mean, it sounds like kind of the default approach is to just kind of pull a well-rounded talent pool together for them to look at and evaluate and kind of see each of these types with these backgrounds that they have that are different from one another. How do they best fit with what we're looking for?
Absolutely. And, the good news is that we've been fortunate to work with search committees that tend to be open-minded to seeing a variety of people. My experience has been once we get through the first phase of a search, what I would call round one of a search, they have a pretty good set of expectations and understanding of the kind of talent they need. It's not uncommon for a first round to have a very diverse slate of people come through and meet with a search committee. In fact, someone on the outside might look in and say, I don't understand why that collection of people are there that day. We do. We understand very clearly why they're there that day. And through our debriefing, they're able to then discuss the trade-offs of pursuing one path or another. And we actually encourage them to think about bringing to a finalist round also a diverse slate if they can, because there are benefits, pros and cons to each kind of a person. Yeah. Look, no one person embodies 100% of anything. That person doesn't exist. But people who embody, 80 to 90% of what you're looking for, as long as it's the right 80 to 90%, can do a fabulous job. And they surround themselves by talent to support and complement in the areas that perhaps they need, they have either challenges or no experience. And the very best leaders know how to defer and build teams around them to support and complement them. That's a great leader.
Yep. Okay, so now I would love to ask you about things that maybe you've seen from where you sit. And the thing that I was really excited, or why I was really excited to talk to you about, is because you've got a unique place where you're working with associations at a certain level, finding the future leaders of their organizations, the visionaries that will kind of help carry them forward. So we talked about culture. We talked about changing demographics, and also, technology having a big impact. Are there any specific trends besides those that maybe you've seen that have occurred the last couple of years in the association and nonprofit industries?
Yeah, another area I wanted to mention is globalization, because in many cases associations have maximized their membership potential in the U.S. or North America specifically, yeah. And they have found that the greatest growth potential for them is outside of North America. That's particularly true of individual membership societies. And in many of the searches that we've done, the search committee has asked us to find people who have done business in other parts of the world, maybe even lived in another part of the world, or certainly have had business relationships or partnerships in other parts of the world. Yeah. The key there is understanding cultures, understanding the unique needs of different markets. And you could really hit the ground running if you did this in another organization. Most people, the first time they do that, they make a lot of mistakes. That's normal because every culture is so different. So if somebody's already been through that and you can learn from those mistakes, that's a great hire. Yeah. So I wanted to just put in that globalization is the future for many groups. We talked about technology a few minutes ago. Now, of course, with the right platform, you could do business anywhere in the world. And they do. And so to that extent, somebody who understands that extra dimension can bring immense new membership value. They can grow the organization. They can raise new revenue and streams of revenue that they never had before by selling publications, conducting online learning, engaging people in conferences in the future, creating alliances that never existed before. It becomes just an incredible new capability that many groups are desiring. And so we go after people with that kind of experience.
Would you say that is that kind of a general trend across associations, maybe of all sizes, or would you say that maybe that's specifically suited for like the mid to large size association?
Good question. I tend to see that more in individual membership societies, first of all, as opposed to trade associations. Right. And from a size perspective, generally mid to larger groups are the kind of client that we tend to have. So it just perhaps by that very nature, that's where I tend to see that. But having said that, a smaller organization with the right team and staff, they can do it as well. And it's the kind of thing that again, having the right people on the team and really understanding how to use technology effectively, you could do a lot. It's just if you're going to move into the global market, you have to be prepared to deliver and be responsive. And if you're too small, it may be hard to meet the expectations. So, again, that's part of the strategic planning phase. A group needs to decide the right size.
Yep. All right. So as we wrap up our discussion, we talked about some of the things that have occurred the last maybe few years since the Great Recession. We talked about, I think globalization is a very critical piece, so I'm glad that you brought that up. Is there anything going forward, maybe in the next 1, 2 to 3 years that you think associations should be looking for when it comes to, just trends that they might be needing to pay attention to as they look at selecting key leaders for their organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, these organizations have a nonprofit status. It's a tax status. They are businesses. They deliver on mission, but they are still businesses. And so going forward, fiscal health, making sure that revenue streams that they've counted on for years are still going to be there in the future is critical. A lot of organizations, they rely on dues, membership dues, conference revenue, publication revenue, continuing education, maybe grants. And each one of those revenue streams come with risk. And some organizations wait too long to really do that work. An example of that would be in publications. There is a moving trend to go to digital publications. That's not new, but it's been moving. But there's some well-known organizations that are still really at the infancy of doing that. The reality is that that's going to accelerate. Many of them had very significant revenue expectations from those hard copy that they may not generate in the same way going digital, and it could be literally millions of dollars, and those are jobs. So being proactive in really understanding where you're getting your money, what are the risks going forward in the future, and if you see something coming, being very proactive to either look for new value add or new ways of generating revenue. It's the ones that don't do that and rest on the past. Unfortunately, it could creep up on them very quickly. Yeah. I would also say that in the conference area, I'm even seeing this with trade associations. The for-profit sector is getting into more and more trade association conferences, creating marketplaces, if you will, exhibits and the like. So they are going head-to-head with many groups that, here again, may rely on even a third or more of their revenue on these conferences. And that could be a very significant problem if they're not really staying ahead of what's going on.
Excellent. All right, Lorraine, well, thank you for doing this interview, and thank you, everybody, for watching. Be sure to sign up in the upper right-hand corner of this website to be updated via email when new interviews are posted. Also, follow @BrianKellyNow on Twitter to stay on top of all things Association Mavens related. And lastly, please submit your recommendation for which Association Maven you'd like to see interviewed next. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to bringing you more great interviews. Bye-bye.